So as you listen along to this sleep story, you can begin to drift and float asleep in your own way, in your own time. And you can get yourself all comfortable, close your eyes, and begin to relax. And I don't know whether you will relax deeper to the sound of my words, the spaces between my words, or whether you'll relax deeper to each out-breath that you take as you listen along to the story in the background. As you listen along to this story, and a man was working hard in the garden. He worked as a gardener, and he would tend to the garden. He'd make it look beautiful. He'd make sure that all the hedges were neat and tidy and symmetrical. He'd make sure the correct flowers were in the correct places, and he enjoyed his job as a gardener. And he would mow the lawn and have a sense of peace while doing such a repetitive task. And he'd mow the lawn and find that his mind would wander and drift and dream about the future, about pleasant experiences from the past. And at the end of every day, he would take his tools back to the shed, place them all in the shed, and go home from work. And this day he worked on the garden, and as the day drew on, he took a brief break, sitting down in the garden, watching butterfly, going from plant to plant, watching bees, travelling in and out of the flowers, watching squirrels climbing trees, chasing each other around the trunks, listening to the way the wind made the trees rustle. And he would take a break and relax and close his eyes and enjoy being in the moment. He always thought of himself as an outdoor person, a lover of nature, someone who could just enjoy simple things like relaxing in a country garden. And while he relaxed, he started to think about the parts of the garden he'd never really explored. He was tasked with keeping the main part of the garden in order, but there were some parts of the garden which were overgrown, which were out of sight, and he was told that there was no need to work on those areas. And he decided that he would explore. So once he finished all his work in the garden, he walked to the back of the garden, followed a path round, walked through a gate, and started walking deeper and deeper into the overgrown part of the garden. And the path was barely visible as he pushed his way through that overgrown part of the garden. And he worked his way through deeper and deeper before discovering a flint wall at the back of the garden. And he followed that flint wall and found that there was a door completely trapped shut with ivy. So he cut his way through the ivy, opened the door, worked his way through that secret door, and found himself seemingly in woodland. But it wasn't the woodland that he was used to seeing. He'd walked around the woodland in this area, around these houses. Only this bit of woodland seemed different. And so he walked into the woodland and noticed the way the woodland and the denseness of the woodland was muffling the sounds, keeping everything quite quiet. There was just the faint sounds of birds, the rustling of the leaves as the wind blew a breeze across the treetops, and he walked deeper and deeper into the woods. And he took great pleasure in exploring woodland he'd never been in before. And as he continued through that woodland, he could hear some running water and knew there must be a stream somewhere. And he headed towards the sound of running water. And after some time he found the stream. And the stream was carving through the woodland. So he decided to follow the stream because it would be easier to walk by the stream than cut through the woodland. And he followed that stream. And after many hours of following this stream with curiosity deep in these woods, he sat down by the stream, and through the trees he could see that the sun had set and the moon was in the sky. And the moon was a full moon, lighting up the sky with the light sparkling and silvery on the water. And he rested by the stream. And as he rested there, just feeling so relaxed, so peaceful, thinking to himself that this area is almost like his sanctuary, his place to go off the beaten track in his own time. For he lives in a flat on a street with no garden, and he tends to this garden, and he enjoys his job tending to the garden. But at the end of every day, he has to go home to a flat on his own, sitting in that flat with no outdoor space, with nowhere to go, to fulfill his love of nature. And yet here is a secret doorway, a secret gate through a wall that leads into some woods he doesn't recognize, and leads to this stream. And he enjoys just sitting, listening to that stream. And he decides to just lie down a moment, close his eyes and relax. And as he lies down, closes his eyes and begins to relax, so he finds himself drifting into a dream, a dream about walking up a mountain and enjoying that journey, enjoying the hard work of climbing the mountain, of figuring out the correct route to take, knowing which turns to take, which parts to climb, when to stop, to look back, see how far you've come, before carrying on that journey, when to take a break, recharge, re-energize yourself, and then carrying on climbing that mountain. And after a while climbing that mountain, about 3/4 of the way up, way above the land below, they stop, they turn round, they gaze over the land below, looking at how far they've come, admiring the view. And there's a cabin nearby, and they enter the cabin. And at this altitude, it's beginning to get cold outside. And in the cabin, they light a fire. They sit in a comfortable chair. They have some food to eat. Feel the warmth of the fire as the sun sets outside and the whistling wind blows past the windows. And the fire flickers in the fireplace as shadows dance on the walls. And while the fire flickers in the fireplace and the shadows dance on the walls, so they begin to drift and fall asleep. And they can hear, as they're drifting asleep, the fire burning down to its last embers, the crackling sound of the fire, and they pull a fluffy and warm blanket across themselves, and they can feel the air going in their nostrils with each breath and out, going in and out, and they drift so comfortably asleep, wrapped up so warm on that seat. And the next morning they eat before leaving the cabin, continuing their journey up the mountain. And they continue that journey all the way towards the top. And as they travel, they see someone, and this person asks them for help, and they offer their assistance, helping the person carry some items, helping the person up a little way over a difficult section. They then say goodbye to that person and carry on their journey, ascending higher up the mountain. And the higher they go, the snowier it gets, and the colder the air gets. And so they wrap up warmer into their coat, feeling warm yet knowing it's cold the higher they get. And after a long climb, they reach the summit. And at the summit is a cave, and they enter that cave, light themselves a fire, knowing they need to rest for the night before descending in the morning. And they sit and rest in that cave, having something to eat, gazing at the flickering lights on the cave walls, hearing the sound of the wind blowing in the cave entrance, feeling warm, comfortable, and drifting and floating asleep in the cave. And as they drift and float asleep, so they begin to dream. They start to dream that they're soaring through the sky like an eagle, flying from the mountaintop, surveying the land below, taking in how far they've come, seeing that cabin, seeing forest, a distant lake, diving down through the clouds, catching an updraft, circling around, occasionally beating the wings, and then just gliding in the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun and enjoying the experience. And after a little while of dreaming of flying, they have this sense of swooping down, landing near the cave, and becoming themselves again, where they awaken to the sun shining in the cave entrance, and they begin their descent. And as they descend, so they see how far they've come. They see that person they helped. They continue their descent. They pass the cabin they stopped off at and continue their descent. And they find their way all the way down the mountain. And as they reach the bottom of the mountain, so they drift out of this sleep and notice the sun's beginning to rise as they rest by the stream. And they feel so refreshed. They feel like they've had the most wonderful night's sleep, not being stuck in a flat, staring at four walls, but instead feeling like they're a part of something greater than themselves, feeling a sense of wonder and connection to the world around them. They find their way along the stream, cutting back up through the woods, finding their way back to that gate, to that door, and they pass through the door, closing it behind them, and walk back through the thick, overgrown bits of garden and out into the main area of the garden. And they know they've got just a few hours before they start work. So they go and sort themselves out, prepare themselves for work. And as they work, they wonder with curiosity about the garden and about where that woodland is. And so on their break, they leave the garden, they walk around the side of the building, they walk along the back way of the building to where the woods should be, and they find that the woods aren't there, that the back wall just seems to be a back wall, that there's no gate going through to any woods. that there's just the normal light woodland around the property. And they find this intensely curious. And so they walk back into the garden. And they walk all the way through to that gate. They pass through that secret gate, that secret door. Find themselves in the dense woodland. And they decide to walk along the wall to see where it'll take them. And they walk along the wall and they keep walking and walking. And they keep walking and walking, and the wall seems to never end. And they discover that it's a bit like, somehow, this is an alternative area. And the wall's slightly too high to look over, so they climb a tree, climb up onto the branches, and peer over the wall. But as they peer over the wall, so they notice that the other side of the wall just seems to be dense woodland. And they walk all the way back to where the gate is. They find a tree near the gate. They climb that tree near the gate. And they look over into the garden. And yet the other side of the wall just seems to be dense woodland. And so they go back through that gate. They climb up to see over the wall from within the garden. And when they look over the wall, it just seems to be light, wooded area, as they would expect. They find this experience curious. So they walk back through that secret gate. And they walk down to the stream. And they head the opposite direction this time, walking along the stream. And as they walk along, they see what looks like some fairies flying around, jumping on different mushrooms, different toadstools. And they think they're seeing things. And they walk closer and closer and realize they're seeing exactly what they are seeing. And when they get close, so these fairies or pixies or whatever they happen to be stop and look at them. And he asks them, where is he? And they explain that he's travelled through to a land on top of land, that there's more than one dimension, that there are certain portals, certain connections between one land and another, that certain beings have placed there. And so whoever the owner of the property was when the property was built obviously created a portal to this land. And from their description, he thought of it a little bit like the tree that Christopher Robin crawls through that takes him through to 100 Acre Wood. And so he wondered if that kind of thing somehow is real, and that this is an example of that, just to this specific dimension, where maybe on Earth there are multiple Earths on top of each other, all as different dimensions, and there are these portals that you pass through. And he asked them, what else is out here? And they spoke about a friendly wizard who lived in a hut not far down the stream, a little bit further on and into a meadow. And they sat and spoke, and this person learned a lot about what goes on in this land, and the peace and harmony in this land, where everyone lives in harmony with nature. And he decided to go and investigate, find his way to that wizard. And so he followed the stream all the way down to a meadow. He walked through the most beautiful meadow with a slight rolling hill, where he found the hut, and he could see the wizard just pottering around outside the hut. And he stopped, he spoke to the wizard, and the wizard told him that he's as old as time, he's as old as this land has been here, that he's the one who was involved in creating the portal between the two worlds many years ago, with some people who moved into the property, and that the portal had been there before the wall. It was just turned into a door, and that when that wall disintegrates and passes on, something else will be there to be used as the portal. It could be that a tree grows in its place, and entering the tree is the portal. It could be another wall, another gate, or something entirely different. But people who don't believe in magic, people who don't want to explore these things, don't have a sense of curiosity and wonder, never seem to explore the areas where the portals are. They just feel that whatever's in that area is boring. They don't explore, and so they don't realize what's there. And after their conversation, the wizard told him he can come back any time, explore further, learn more. And the gardener found his way back, went back into the garden, carried on his work back in the garden, deciding not to tell anyone else currently about what he'd discovered, just knowing he had somewhere to go now, somewhere he can enjoy nature peacefully and calmly. And that night he went to bed and drifted and floated asleep, so peacefully, so relaxed, dreaming of this new place that he'd found, drifting, floating, asleep.